So you want to move away from the Adobe Suite, but you think to yourself, can Fusion even do motion graphics? Can Fusion actually replace After Effects and Illustrator? What am I going to do? Should I even quit now? No, don't quit just yet. Now I know swapping over can make you feel like a baby again, but we have to give it time to grow. So here's your new pipeline, Affinity to Fusion for motion graphics.
Step 1. Create a vector design in Affinity.
The first thing we have to do is create a graphic that we're actually going to animate in a software like Canva or Affinity or even Adobe. I almost got you there. We're not using Adobe here. Now there's plenty of videos online that explain how to use Affinity if you're unfamiliar, so make sure you go check those out because this tutorial is not going to do that. But once you've created an asset, here's how to export it for DaVinci Resolve. To export your file, go to File, Export, choose SVG High Quality, and save it. Now if I'm using any text, I'll generally convert that to a curves. Right click on the text and click Convert to Curves.
Step 2. Import SVG into Fusion.
Open DaVinci Resolve, create a new timeline and a new Fusion clip. Go into the Fusion drop-down tab and click Import SVG. If you've exported your layers correctly, Fusion will import it into an awesome, amazing node tree to get you started. Thanks, Fusion.
Step 3. Organize layout.
Now, organizing your layout is super important. Now, I always rearrange my SVG node tree that we've imported so it looks a bit cleaner and a bit more understandable to me. There's a couple nodes that are really helpful for organizing your workflow. Underlay nodes are very helpful for visually grouping your nodes. You can also literally collapse or group your nodes so it's smaller, kind of like a pre-comp in After Effects. Sticky notes are helpful for reminding yourself the things you did and why you did them, because you obviously won't forget. Pipe routers are useful for reshaping connection lines. Grid alignment is also really helpful. Right-click anywhere in the empty green background of the node panel, hover over Arrange tools, and you'll see several options. This basically snaps your nodes to a grid or close to each other to make the workspace look neat. File naming is probably the most intensive but most important part for large, complex node trees. I tend to use shortened anagrams or phrases to help me remember. For merge, I say MRG. For polygon, I use P. You get the point.
Step 4. Animation.
It might be at this point where the fear and the doubt starts creeping into your mind. Is it actually really worth it? But you got to remind yourself, you're getting away from that Adobe system, that Adobe tax, that Adobe failed updates. You got to hold on to that freedom. I live in Australia. Now you'll have a couple key tools when you're animating in Fusion. The first tool I'd recommend understanding is your resize node tool. Now the one thing After Effects does do quite well, on the side. When you import something in After Effects, it'll automatically match your composition's resolution. That doesn't really happen in Fusion because it's a more free compositor. If you have an asset that has a different resolution to your composition, you might need to add in a resize node to match it all up. If your asset has a different aspect ratio, then add in a crop node and a transform node, click keep centered, and then scale up your transform node. Whenever you use a native Fusion node, it will match your default Fusion composition's settings, which can cause problems. To change this, go into the node setting, uncheck use frame format settings, and input your correct resolution. You may also need to adjust Fusion's default composition settings. You can do this by going into the Fusion tab and looking in settings and inputting your correct dimensions. The transform node is useful for animating the position of your asset. You can also combine multiple transform nodes, kind of like nulls in After Effects. You can also add expressions to those transform nodes, which you might want to look at another video to do. A sneaky tip in the spline editor, make sure you choose show only selected tool so you can view the thing that you're working on. Now Fusion also has its own inbuilt shape tools or shape pipeline tools like SB Spline and more. Now whenever you use one of these S pipeline nodes, you want to make sure that you have an S render node to convert it into pixel space so that you can view it in your compositor. Lastly, for animating, it's actually really important to know how to mask well. There's two main ways to mask out a layer, either by using the mask input of your layer or by using a merge node set to mask/stencil. I like the second option because it gives me more visual cues of what's actually going on.
Step 5. Effects.
Now here's some common effects you might want to use in Fusion for your motion graphics. Now there's two ways to add motion blur in Fusion. If you've used the transform node and animated it, you can actually go into the setting and click motion blur. Or you have to add motion blur later on by using an optical flow node as well as a vector motion blur node. Now this method is a lot slower. I often click the half resolution button to speed things up. Now gradients are a bit more tricky in Fusion because you actually have to make them. To create a gradient that you can use, add in a polygon and background node. Mask where your gradient should be, add in two merge nodes, change the operating setting of the first node to mask, and connect the output to the second node. Lastly, up the feather amount. Now, something I often use for animating was the dissolve or grain feature in Adobe After Effects, but in Fusion it's a bit different. Now, to create that grainy, shadowy noise effect layer, this is how you do it. First, add in a fast noise effect, keyframe the seethe rate, increase the scale to around 150-ish, adjust the detail, contrast, and brightness, go into the color tab, change the colors to black. If you created the gradient from before, you can swap your background layer with this noise layer to get an interesting effect. In Adobe After Effects, there's an effect called Posterize Time that helps you create a stop motion effect. In Fusion, we literally have an effect called stop motion, which we can use as a replacement. Simply input the stop motion effect on top of your animated footage, and then you can choose the playback speed to your liking. And the last thing to chat about is actually something that you might not think about, but color management. Now, this is something to be conscious of if you're working in different color spaces when editing. As an example, you might have times where you have a mismatch between the color space that you choose and the generative native nodes that DaVinci Fusion uses in their color space. I often use an ACES workflow, which is a linear workflow, which means I have to be conscious about how my native generative Fusion nodes are working. I'll often add in a color transform or an ACES transform node in order to recorrect the colors. Here I can set the input and output color space in order to make it work normally. And bam, just like that, you've created a banger motion graphics animation, not using Adobe After Effects. Bam. Now, if I'm being completely honest with you, there is one thing I would say. DaVinci Resolve Fusion is a great compositor and can often match a lot of the effects that Adobe After Effects has. But if your whole stick and your whole career is doing motion graphics, then there's probably going to be some things that are missing in Fusion or not as streamlined as Adobe After Effects or not as supported as Adobe After Effects. Dare I say, if it is your main stick, it might be worth still considering using Adobe Illustrator and After Effects as your main editing software. But if it's not your main stick and you're doing occasional high quality motion graphics work, then I think Fusion is a great alternative. Now, if you made it to the end of this video and you didn't get absolutely annoyed by my voice, I think that's worthy of a subscribe. That's a big achievement. In all seriousness, make sure to subscribe to get more content like this, and let me know in the comments if you have any questions and anything I missed.